Last year I made the cutest DIY Christmas cards, but never got to share them with you because I got sick. So this year I will undo all my mistakes and share my knowledge with you, so that we can all have fun together with our Christmas crafts. So let's talk materials. I used a bunch of things, as you can see, but I had every little thing of these already at home. So if you don't have all of the materials needed, there's always a substitute. But to be precise, let's have a look at it. For most of my designs I did not need that much color and only used my Ecoline liquid watercolors in red and green, which paired very nicely but is not necessary. Any watercolor palette will do it. For outlining I mostly used my micron pens and brush pens and acrylic marker in silver, and my fresh bought Uniball gel pens in silver and gold. For sketching I went for a mechanical pencil, my basic eraser, my kneading eraser. To paint with my watercolors I used these synthetic brushes for watercolor painting that come attached with a little container for fresh water and have a really steady pointed and flexible tip, which makes them my favorite brushes for watercolor painting. But normal brushes should do just fine. And with this in mind, we can start with our first card. It's by far the easiest because there's no painting and no lettering skills required. We are basically only using our pencil to sketch and the silver pen for lining out. Because this is a very minimalistic and clean design, you could also just get away with writing Merry Christmas in a less cursive font, but with bold letters if you don't like your cursive writing or don't feel comfortable trying new lettering techniques on a Christmas card for a loved one. Essentially, we shape out an isosceles triangle, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and fill it with little ornaments of leaves and berries with our silver pen. I like to use a silver pen because it has a nice shimmer to it that makes the whole card look very elegant and put together without using a lot of fancy equipment or a lot of work involved. If you, however, don't have a silver pen, I would of course recommend you to buy one because they are awesome. But this does not mean that you can't pull this card off without one. You can switch it out for a gold one or just use a black pen on either brown or white crafting paper. If this is not festive enough for you, you could paint the triangle shape beforehand with some watercolors for a pop of color and without adding too much work. And with this we finished our first card. Just be careful when you try to erase your guidelines. Gel pens tend to stay wet for a whole while, even after you finish drawing. For the moment, just put it aside and start to carefully erase after you did all your cards. But after that, you can look at how cute this little card is. I mean, chef's kiss. So let's jump right into our next card. It's a very cute but easy design with a few more materials and steps to it than our first one, which makes it a little harder, but honestly, it's still pretty easy. You'll need brown crafting paper, a pencil, one black pen with a fine tip, and one black brush pen, a red watercolor and brush, and kinda optional, a gold gel pen for the little extra. We will of course start with a sketch of a mistletoe. If you never ever drew a mistletoe before, don't worry, it's sort of a glorified twig with some red berries and a bow on top. Just group 3 little strands of leaves together like I'm doing and add a few groups of berries at the end of each strand, because the more berries are on a mistletoe, the more color we can add. I used a very pigmented red. It's a red color 311 or 311 from the Ecoline liquid watercolor palette. I think I once got like a basic set of 10. Because I wanted some watercolors that are more pigmented because my koi palette is a little muted. And as you can see, the red is a very vibrant and glowing, which pairs really nicely with the design. I tried to use it straight out of the container and apply it with the pipette to save time, but quickly switched to a brush to gain more control and to add this wet on wet technique. Basically, you want to wet the paper before you add the color, so that the color can spread more organically on the paper. However, if you make a little mistake, please don't panic. I know that it might feel like a disaster, but try to soak up the excess liquid with a paper towel and slightly tap off the colors that spread too much. Don't try to wipe it away because it could smudge the stain right over the whole paper, like in my case. Just relax, and if everything is dry again, you can try to reshape the blob into a more berry-like shape. Anyway, if you don't have watercolor of any kind, you could really just use whatever red color you have at home. Alcohol markers, acrylic paint, a bold red pen. It really is not that important. Just use what you have. The same goes for the next step, where take a brush pen to thicken the outline. If you don't have any brush pens, you could also use a very bold black pen to thicken the outline. I just like the way a brush pen automatically adds line weight to an outline and makes it therefore more dynamic. Just be careful that you don't outline everything because it takes away from the filigree. Our last step is to add the golden highlights, and even though the step is totally optional, I love the way a little bit of gold can enhance the drawing that much. It's always the best part for me, which is why I added either gold or silver to every card. And look at the result. It's such a cute and easy design, and I really love the festive and cute shine of it. Speaking of cute shine, it's time for a little candlelight with our next card. This one is a little bit more advanced than the previous. We would need a lot more work with sketching, coloring and finishing touches, which is why I would say that this card is a more medium card on the scale. Still, if you are a little artsy, this shouldn't be a real challenge for you. At first we try to sketch out our motif on the paper and try to make it as center as possible. If you're not comfortable guessing, you can of course measure out the exact middle of the page to be sure. This way you will not have to cheat like I did, because my guess was a little off to the left bottom corner and I didn't notice until I was finished with my whole outline. If this happens to you, you have two options. Either cutting the part off that makes your card uncentered, in my case the right upper corner. If you do this, you should really work precise with a ruler and some sharp scissors to not make everything look wobbly. But if this is not an option for you, you can use a little trick of mine. Instead of trimming off the section that makes everything uneven and unbalanced, just line this part out, creating a new border and thereby creating the illusion of symmetry. This way it looks more like a design choice than a mistake. You could even decorate the border if you want to. I kept mine very simple, just a pop of golden color. Anyway, if you are done with the whole sketching and making a symmetrical portion, you can start to outline. And when I outline the whole thing, I don't like to make the rest looking too clean, but a little messy. But this is just my style preference, because I like a little controlled mess. It helps to hide mistakes and it gives the card a little more personality. After all, it is a handmade card and I'm not ashamed to show that off. It's something to be proud of. But please feel free to do it the way you feel comfortable. I just like to keep my designs more simple and easy to do because I'm usually making cards in a bunch and can't spend an hour per card because I want everyone to get a little handmade love from me. That's also why I simplified the shape of the wreath. Instead of drawing 100 little twigs with the needles, I just simplified it into a leaf-like shape that I like to first increase, then decrease in size on its way on the half circle. And when you hop to the color, I like to use a bunch of different watercolor greens for some color variation. The candle and bow are colored in red because I thought it would be a very Christmassy color palette, and topped everything off with some golden highlights. But please feel free to individualize. Of course, if this card is for your bestie and her favorite color is blue, switch up the colors accordingly. Even if it's not as Christmassy, do whatever you like best. Also, if you think my golden details are cheesy, you don't have to add them just because I did. And if you cannot for the life of you write cute in cursive, you don't have to. Just because it is my preference does not mean that you need to do it the same way. Please do what you can do and want to do. Because there are no limitations in art, and just because I show you how I did it does not mean that this is the only way. Feel free to leave things out and add things if that's what you like best, and make this card your own little creation. I did nothing different. Searched for inspiration online and collected all the items I liked and got rid of all the things I didn't like. And this is the result. I really like it. It's very cute. But I think the best cards are still ahead of us. So let's get to our next card. This one is for everyone who thinks lettering and calligraphy is fun. I put this into a medium category because if there are art babies who never tried lettering for fun, this could be a little too advanced. But for someone with a little art and lettering experience, this card can be so much fun. It's done in a few minutes, does actually not need a lot of materials, and could be done in so many beautiful ways. You could make a whole series of Christmas lyrics lettering cards with different motifs if you are more into lettering than drawing, and it will be such a cute addition to every present. Also, you would not need to write Merry Christmas for like the 20th time. Because I'm a lettering beginner, I must say this was very easy, even for someone like me. And if you have at least a decent handwriting, this should be very easy for you. Just sketch the rough outline of a Christmas tree and start to fill in the words. Make sure that you alternate between size and writing style every row. For example, I did not use two cursive writing styles underneath each other without breaking it up with some bolder capital letters. Also, with this card, I tried to not sketch too messy but have a rather clean look to the bow and twigs because it fits the theme of the card better. If you're done with the sketch, you can take a fine liner or a brush pen and start to letter your way down. Personally, I chose a fine black pen to draw out the star on top, and chose a brush pen for the rest of the lettering work, because I really liked the dynamic feeling of it and got enough experience in lettering to get a range of line thickness with just this one pen. But if you never worked with brush pens before, there is no shame in using simple black pens. Just make sure that you do not use only one thickness for the whole design, because switching up things with bolder strokes or fine details is what makes this card so interesting to look at. And if you think that you cannot recreate this beautiful cursive handwriting look with just a pen, you are wrong. There is a way. I actually learned this from a friend in art school, but there are dozens of tutorials online to this fake calligraphy technique. You write out your word a little wider so that the letters are more spread out, and then you thicken every downstroke. This way you get the same result because it's basically the same thing you do when you are writing with a brush pen. With a brush pen, you try to keep your lines very thin until there is a downwards motion, then you press a little harder onto the paper to create a thicker stroke. If you try this for yourself, don't get discouraged if it doesn't work out on the first try. Calligraphy is a lot of practice and muscle memory, and the output is also sometimes in correlation to the materials you use. I got my brush pens from Amazon because I was not satisfied with the one I had from Micron, even though I love my Pigma Micron fine liner set. I got a pencil calligraphy pen set, 3 brush pens for about $10, and will immediately buy them again the minute they are dying. I got them in 3 different sizes, fine, medium and broad, and really love them. So if you want to give calligraphy a shot, maybe invest about $10 and try it for yourself. You can create such cute things, and honestly, writing my header in school with a cursive calligraphy touch always made me a little happier when looking back at my notes. So if you're done with the lettering part, use my little trick to bring the whole motif back to center and edit the golden details. It is time to jump to our next card. And this card is the most advanced one we had so far. Because for this card we need some watercolor paper or at least mixed medium. Watercolors, big and tiny watercolor brushes, fine liners, silver gel or acrylic pens, and a little bit of patience because this card starts with a circle. And I hate drawing circles. I'm sorry I said it. I know a lot of artists who feel the same about circles. And I'm very, very glad my camera didn't record the struggle I had drawing this circle with fine liners, because oh my, I'm glad it's over now. Of course, you can use compasses or glasses for reference, but outlining a circle that it still looks good, that's a true challenge for me. With your circle, you should also outline the rest of the Christmas tree ball and start adding colors. We again use the wet on wet technique, meaning we start with a layer of water and add colors as the surface is still wet, so that the colors can flow into each other in a more natural way. I started with an emerald green color, transitioning into a darker blue color. In the first round, the colors were pretty diluted, but as I added colors progressively, I made them more vibrant, because I wanted to have more contrast between the colors and the silver ornaments that are following. Just make sure that with every round of color, you still leave a white highlight. This highlight gives the Christmas tree ball more dimension. Instead of just being a flat circle, it looks more like a 3D sphere. To make everything look cohesive, I thought I wanted to add some colors to the Merry Christmas header, but I decided against it and covered it with my acrylic silver pen as good as I could. Interestingly, I just added the silver details to every downward stroke, as if I was using my fake calligraphy technique mentioned before. I tried to not panic, even though I didn't like the header at this point, but the silver kinda saved it. And then I quickly started adding the silver details to my Christmas tree ball. With this ornamenting, I just did whatever felt right and looked good in my head. To be fair, I already doodled a lot of such ornaments out of pure boredom, or to add a little something to a boring sketchbook page. So this was very easy for me, but if you never did anything like this, you can look up doodling leaves and branches and you will find hundreds of different ways to try yourself. I like to work my way from the outline of the bowl inwards with branches that vary in size and form, and repeating elements occasionally to give it a very put together look. Also, I try to make the branches flow together and have a little bit of movement to the elements, so that they don't look that stiff. And lastly, I added dots on the outer rim of the ball. I did not really think much about this decision, but I like it really. It reminds me of falling snow and gives it an extra wintry look. This design really gives me winter vibes and like winter season feelings with its cool color palette and the silver on top. I just love it. Sorry, I love all of them. This card falls under the hard category, even though the ornaments are not that hard to draw, but because it is so time consuming to do. While it looks absolutely lovely in the end and so effortless, you can honestly make about 2 or 3 cards with very simplistic designs in the same time you make this one. It's also the only card that has another orientation. We need to turn the paper into a landscape format for this one, so that the fold is facing up. Next, we start to sketch out our primary word, joy. I recommend that if you want to try this method on other words, that you should use short words, because this way you can really increase the size of the word and therefore make it more readable even with the whole ornamenting. If you cannot increase your word size, you would need to decrease the size of the ornaments, which personally speaking would make this a never-ending story. After sketching out a prominent word and the subtitles, we are already done with sketching and start to fill the space with ornaments like this. I decided to use branches with berries, strings of leaves, and big loose leaf shapes to fill most of the space, because it is a very wintry theme and is easy to squeeze into the needed space. From here on, it really is trial and error and just going with the flow, because you have a rough framework to work with and a lot of space to fill. That's why I think this is a little more difficult card to replicate, because there's no previous sketch. course, you could sketch everything out beforehand, but to be honest, we already have to make this design twice. Once with the black pen and second with the golden gel pen for highlights. Adding a third time just to be sure it looks good is not worth the time for me. But essentially this card has only 3 steps and needs only a very limited material list, which has also its benefits. And once you start adding the totally optional but beautiful golden highlight, you can truly see the beauty of this card unfold. It's my favorite design, to be honest, just because it looks that cute. And with this we can start with my second favorite card design. Last but not least comes this watercolor Christmas tree. I love the way this one looks, because even if I tried to replicate it and did everything just like the first time, it would still look totally different. That's what's so beautiful about it. If you let watercolor do its thing without interfering too much, there's this loose flow of color that just looks magnificent. That's also why I categorize this card as hard. The sketch, as we can see, is not much of a challenge. The rough framework of a Christmas tree with a star on top. A few branches here, a few branches there. Very basic on its own. So easy, you could actually skip the sketch and just do the outline right on if you're confident enough. Because there's really not that much that could go wrong on this stage. Even the lettering skills are very basic with my fake calligraphy technique, as previously discussed. Just writing the words out a little bit more stretched out, so that you can thicken every downward stroke afterwards. It looks very cute and is fairly easy to do. You do not have to use a brush pen like I did. A normal pen or fine liner also does the job. Fine liner even gives you the opportunity to write everything out in a different color than black if you want to individualize your designs a little. But this is actually not what makes this card so beautiful after all. The magic comes now, when we use our famous wet on wet technique. You should know this one by heart by now. First, take a brush and wet the surface. Then you choose your colors and add them to the water with the second brush. You really can go crazy with this one. The more different greens you use, the better. I used about 4 or 5 that worked fairly well together and just worked my way forward, coloring branch by branch. Always making sure I use different shades of green and vary not only my brush size but let the colors flow loose. The defining comes after all your basic shades are laid down. Now you can take a fine brush and start to give the tree more shape and define little details that make this green blob more convincing than before. Just make sure that the areas that you want to refine are already dry, as the colors will melt into the wetness otherwise. Lastly, you can color the star and the tree trunk and even add some Christmas tree balls on the edge of the tree. I chose a very vibrant red because it's the complementary color of green, so the highest contrast you can get, and also because it's one of the most common Christmas color palettes. I mean, red and green is really that iconic. However, I wouldn't advise you to try to add the balls inside of the Christmas tree, because they could never be as vibrant inside and will just dull your beautiful Christmas tree. If you absolutely want to add them everywhere, you should use an art supply that can cover up the watercolor, like acrylic paints or pens. Or you could use masking fluid before painting the Christmas tree and leave out little spots for the tree balls afterwards. Never forget that there are no rules or restrictions to art. You can do whatever you want to do. Change the colors, put it upside down, add glitter and sparkles. Just have fun with it and it's going to be awesome either way. And with these wise words, I thank you for making it this far into the video. If you liked it, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear this. Save it for later or just give it a thumbs up, it really helps me out. Don't miss my next video by subscribing to my channel. Thank you for watching and listening. And until next time, keep drawing.